so I can get the phone calls happening. 617-396-4958 is the number, and I'm going to be joined shortly by Dr. Steve Turley, who is the host of his own YouTube channel, Turley Talks, and who has been on the cutting edge for many years regarding the, what we would call the nationalist populist movement. Dr. Steve Turley has been, as I say, a leader of the Nationalist, Populist, Traditionalist Coalition, is what he calls it. I would add to that libertarians and disgruntled Democrats, both nationally and internationally. I mean, Dr. Turley's been around in England and France as well regarding this movement, and has been a great leader in terms of advocating it. And of course, President Trump is and was a great and articulate leader of this movement. He has changed American politics. It was just mentioned to me that American politics, this was by somebody who hates Trump, has been transformed from what it was 10 years ago. And of course, they're right. We see emerging around the world a greater awareness, a greater wokeness, if you will, of the importance of the progressive principle of sovereignty, of national sovereignty as a mirror to personal sovereignty, that this is a progressive development. This is democratic. It is the assumption of responsibility on the part of the sovereign citizen under God, and to control as many aspects of their own life and destiny as possible, which is, of course, the ideal for an image of God. And that's what we are, imperfect images of God. And in that context, we establish governments and we establish institutions that reflect this reality, the order by which we can preserve, protect, and defend our rights as sovereign citizens in a context of moral standards and existence, what's best for our advancement, what's right, what's wrong. We identify truth, we identify falsehood, we constrain the more evil aspects of our own nature by doing so. So anyway, to make a long story short, Dr. Steve Turley will be joining us on the YouTube channel, and you'll hear this on all of the audio channels very shortly. I am very pleased to welcome him. He's a friend of the show, and his YouTube channel is huge. He's a true intellectual, and he has been on the cutting edge of certainly documenting the stolen election and the voter fraud, going right up to the end of it, and then onward and upward. Now, having said that, let's talk about what's happening now briefly with regard to this issue. The Dominion software company is now saying they're going to sue Rudolph Giuliani for something like $1.5 billion. I see this as a good thing, not a bad thing, because it's going to mean that Giuliani, and I hope he brings Sidney Powell in as his lawyer. That would be freaking amazing. They're going to be able to finally get discovery, and we're finally going to be able to dig into and see the evidence in a courtroom of what has been accused, what has been assumed to be their fraud. And I hope that Giuliani, as part of the law case, brings in my own U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, and the New York Times, which covered the story, as people who can testify to the fraud that they had claimed was committed by the Dominion software system. So, Elizabeth Warren, by the way, I mean, she has been trying to, according to Jeff Kuhner at WRKO here in Boston, She's been trying to have that information deleted from the internet. She doesn't want us to know about this. But the fact of the matter is that 2 years ago, before, of course, all the controversy, Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar both spoke publicly in the U.S. Senate about Dominion Software and their concern that Dominion Software was engaging in fraud. So, they can't erase that. That apparently there is video of this. And now, of course, they want to deny it because Dominion Software has been caught and because it's now being proven. And they're not going to get away with it because the question I suppose I would have for Dominion Software and for commentators who look at this is, why is it that they are suing Rudolph Giuliani, but they're not suing Elizabeth Warren, and they're not suing Amy Klobuchar, who basically made the same claim, the same accusation? In fact, in their case, they did it more publicly by doing it in the well of the U.S. Senate. Why aren't they taking them on, huh? I hope that it does go to this, because this could be like the O.J. Simpson trial. I could see many of the America's most famous lawyers jumping in on it, including Alan Dershowitz and other civil libertarians, and the media will have to cover it. And hopefully we will finally get a presentation of the evidence at long last. That's all we can ask for. Okay, so we've got Dr. Steve Turley hopefully coming on any minute. You can never tell in this wonderful world of internet what might happen. Let's see. Let me just see here. Yes, Dr. Turley, come on down. So we're expecting Dr. Steve Turley. So that's what's going on. I mean, we've got the Dominion Software threatened lawsuit. They've been threatening this for a while. I hope they go through with it. It would be absolutely amazing. We have former President Donald Trump now saying that that he is not going to spearhead a third party. So there's not going to be the Patriot Party. But instead, he's established an office of the former president, which is interesting and which is, I think, like a lot of things that Donald Trump does, it's unprecedented. And the capacity of that office remains to be seen, but I believe that he's going to advocate for causes he believes in, stand up against, what we might euphemistically call, rhino Republicans who try to do, including those who supported this idiotic hoax that he should be again impeached. By the way, speaking of which, it was interesting to me that Schumer, the head of the head of the U.S. Senate, said that because someone resigns doesn't mean that they can't also be impeached or convicted of in an impeachment context. I didn't realize that President Trump resigned. I don't think he did resign. I think his term ran out. So, I mean, or maybe there's something going on there that we don't know about. I don't know. It's like, what do you mean resigned? It also brings up the fact that that Nixon resigned when he was told that he would be not only impeached but removed and convicted for the Watergate situation, and yet he was not. There was no attempt to impeach him after he left, and there could have been, even with the Ford pardon, which had more to do with absolving Nixon of personal crimes, because Ford did not want to see Nixon brought before trial, and it would have been too disruptive to the country. And so he basically did that in an atmosphere by which, whether or not Nixon was guilty, I don't know if I really want to relive that, but what we do know is that there was an atmosphere similar to the fictional atmosphere that Frankenstein faced. You had people with torches standing outside ready to have him burned to the stake. Trump was president when he was charged. Just because he is no longer POTUS means nothing. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose you could make that argument. Look, maybe constitutionally you could. I mean, Schumer said that constitutional scholars, both Republican and Democrat, have said that they can go forward with the conviction. I'd like to see him cite the names of those people. I don't think they do. I don't think any of them have said that. I'd like to see who said that, because I don't think that from a constitutional standpoint, it's highly questionable. And, it certainly is just another attempt to have Trump's head on the silver platter and to stop him. And Schumer's upfront about that. They want to stop him, and they want to stop anyone associated with him from ever holding public office again. They're going to continue to do this under this hoax, this lie, that somehow Trump wanted people to overthrow the government. That's what an insurrection is. That he led an effort. What did he want to do? Send people in clown outfits and buffalo wings, buffalo horns into the White House so that they could seize control of the Congress? I mean, it's ridiculous. It was obviously an over rambunctious reaction by maybe some Trump supporters, mainly spearheaded by Antifa and BLM, who actually were violent, to try to create a distraction so that the joint session of Congress would not be able to debate the contested election in 7 states, something that was stopped. That's the sum effect of it. Trump didn't gain from that. He lost from that. That would have been, the best path forward. It was finally going to take place, that in a public forum, we would have an accountability in terms of, where is Dr. Turley? I don't know. I'm expecting him. Come on, Steve. Where are you? I know that I have him scheduled today. Let me just double check. 617-396-4958. Yeah, Steve Turley, 12 o'clock. 617-396-4958. Let me just see here. Right. Anyway, where is Steve? Let's see. Let me just send a note to his publicist. All right. Yeah, I did everything right. I sent everything Tuesday, 12 p.m. Sure. Okay. Well, maybe he'll be roused up. I don't know. This is internet radio, so it's not as bad a problem as it would be if it was live radio. I mean, where you really are stuck. However, if for some reason he doesn't come on, I will once again contact him. I'll once again try to schedule him, because I really want to interview Steve Turley. I admire his work. But in the meantime, 617-396-4958. If you'd like to join the conversation, you're welcome to do it. 617-396-4958. So, state legislators in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona are continuing. There we go. All right, we are joined by Dr. Steve Turley. Steve, can you hear me?
I can. I'm sorry. The Google power outage is going on here apparently in Boston New York and D.C. I just looked at the map there.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so it took me about 10 minutes to log on to you, so I'm sorry about that.
Not at all. Thank you for joining me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you on, Steve. You are one of the, in a sense, an international figure when it comes to defining what you describe as the Nationalist, Populist, Traditionalist coalition. I would add to that libertarians and disgruntled Democrats.
Definitely disgruntled Democrat. Yes, yeah. The beauty of populism is, ironically, we can it provides a new common ground, a new meeting place for people on the disgruntled right and disgruntled left. Absolutely, yeah.
Now, since the last time we spoke, obviously the election has been completely and utterly stolen, and Biden has been installed.
Don't hold anything back, Charles.
Not at all. They were able to disrupt the joint session of Congress where we were supposed to hear the evidence of voter fraud from 7 states. The minute Arizona started to present their evidence, and it was pretty compelling, all of a sudden you have the guy with the buffalo hat and everybody pouring in, and everything gets shut down. Then in the wee hours of the next morning, they gavel Biden through. No debate. The public never gets to hear the evidence. There was no court system, state or federal or Supreme Court, that would allow the evidence to be heard in the proper forum. The media, of course, was completely in the bag. The Mockingbird media never investigated, never researched, never interviewed any of the 1,000 affidavits. In other words, the whole thing was hermetically sealed and everything was shut down. And so here we are now. I understand that there are still several states, Arizona in particular, but also Michigan and Pennsylvania, where you have state legislators, where the actual power resides to regulate elections, and which is one of the reasons why this case was supposed to be heard by the Supreme Court. Article 2, Section Clause 3 of the Constitution, that the state legislators shall regulate election policy, that they are still in continuing with their investigation. Do you have any information about that, Steve?
Not too much. I'm hoping to. So we chatted with Doug Mastriano of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. He's spearheading an electoral integrity. He's a state senator spearheading electoral integrity bills. He wants to get rid of the no excuse mail-in ballots that their rabid liberal governor signed in. That basically said if you want to vote by mail for any reason whatsoever, you can. So he's trying to restore the electoral integrity in Pennsylvania. I know that part. And then Mark Fincham, over state representative in Arizona, he is spearheading the fulfillment of the state Senate there that had subpoenaed the Dominion voting machines for a forensic audit. And they were inspired by the whole fiasco in Antrim County, Michigan, where the machines had a demonstrable 60% failure rate. And he said, well, if that happened in a county or town with county with 25,000 people, and what do you think was going to happen with Maricopa County with 4.5 million? Mm-hmm. So it looks like they're going to eventually get it. They're not letting go of this, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, is on social media and so forth. We've all basically been given a gag order. We're not really allowed to report on things like that. So that makes alt tech all the more valuable and all the more resourceful for information. That's why, again, love your platform, love all these other platforms we're getting on particularly Rumble and Gab and Minds and the like. And hopefully we'll see Parler back soon. That's what the talk of the town is. So Anyway, that's what I know from it. Unfortunately, it's limited, but that's what I understand at this point.
Right. And by the way, just as a sidebar, I'd like to mention, Steve, that I am very inspired by your example regarding alternative media. Like this program is now downloaded both to Minds and Rumble. I also run live on Restream, which puts it up on DLive and about 7 other platforms. And I downloaded into Podomatic, where the audio goes on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and a bunch of other people. So I'm trying to diversify the number of platforms. If they take me out on one of them, I'll still be up on the other, and I'm determined to do this thing every day at 12 noon, as long as there's someone out there left who's going to still carry the show. Now, I just want to zero in a little bit more on the Maricopa County situation, because I heard an interview with the people in the state legislature who are suing the election auditors in that state. These are people who have subpoenas, who are not responding. They could be arrested for that. And they say that they are now coming in, and they now have agreed to a forensic audit of the Dominion machines. But the problem is that it's going to be done by the same corrupt people who have been there all along, and they're not going to really get into a full and complete audit of those machines. And I mean, to my way of thinking, this should be one of the civil rights issues of our time right now, because if we don't have one man, one vote, if we don't have an honest vote, I don't care whether it's Trump or going back 10 years, we're not going to have a free country. And I would hope that reasonable people, now that they have Biden installed, they don't have to worry about it anymore. No one's going to question that. But let's still have a full accounting, and let's get rid of these electronic machines. There's no reason for this. No, other countries don't use it. Texas didn't use it. My own Senator Elizabeth Warren, along with Senator Amy Klobuchar, who are now both trying to have this removed from the internet, by the way. A year and a half ago, they held hearings where they questioned Dominion software. And now Dominion Software is suing Rudy Giuliani for $1.5 billion. I hope that he brings Sidney Powell in as his lawyer. And this is maybe this is finally the opportunity, which was not afforded during the corrupt election, where the evidence can be presented in a courtroom. This could be a trial bigger than O.J. Simpson. They'll have to pay attention to it. We'll get Dershowitz in there. All the same characters will probably go in to help Giuliani. And we'll finally get to see this rotten system, who financed them, where they derived their money, where they came from, how they did this, the algorithms that they manipulated, the whole shebang. We'll get to the bottom of it. What do you think?
That's great. Yeah, that's a neat analysis there. I would love to see it. We'll have to see. It's a bit speculative at this point, obviously. But granted, I mean, the lawsuit, obviously, from Dominion is there to intimidate people from speaking out against it. I don't think Giuliani's even the least bit intimidated by it.
Right.
And of course, they want a settlement, so they want some cash as a result. But you're right. I think in many respects, this could be the opportunity we've been waiting for in terms of bring out the evidence for the American people to see. Up to this point, again, it just seems to me it'd be strange. They're not going to be able to courts aren't going to be able to cite lack of standing or any procedural technicalities like that.
Yeah.
With Giuliani's situation, so it would have to go to trial, would have to be reported on. One thing I do notice, though, that you saw over the weekend on the George Stephanopoulos show with Rand Paul, that interaction was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Rand Paul did a stand-up job excoriating this left-wing activist disguised as a journalist, George Stephanopoulos. By pointing out to him that he represents a media that has officially and objectively stopped being a press and have become an advocacy group. They've become a super PAC. And what his point was is, look, when you talk about election fraud, claims of election fraud, you've got two sides to this. You've got one side that said this is the most pristine election that's ever been held in the history of humanity. And then Stephanopoulos says, well, no election's perfect, but everything was certified and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got another side who says, yes, but that certification was part of the fraud. That was part of the problem, where you have these secretaries of states making rules and regulations that should never have been able to do, where you have all these mail-in ballots coming in 700% more than what you got in 2016, but with 1,000% decrease in rejection. Just having the standard rejection of anywhere from 4 to 6% of mail-in ballots, standard rejection alone, Trump would be president right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, but instead of weighing the both sides and looking at it, instead you and the press have said one side is truth and the other side is all lies. And he said, you're not press anymore. You're an extension of a political party. You're a partisan wing at that point, objectively speaking. You are no longer looking at both sides, trying to help your viewers and your readers and your audience to make the best decision here, because that's what a democracy requires. It requires a dialectic, a dialogue, two sides, right, going back and forth, two logoi, as they say in Greek. So, but he did a great job showing that the media right now is 1,000% corrupt. And so we have a full politicization of knowledge, and that is opening up now the opportunity for alt tech to come in and say there is another side. And that side over there, the Stephanopoulos side, is increasingly becoming... See, this is the key, which for me is interesting. Mm-hmm. If that's the way they're going to set up the states, this side is all truth and that side is all lies, what's to prevent us from taking the exact same posture, but from a mirror image? Our side is all truth, their side is all lies. And then all of us, by definition, you have a balkanized society. And right. we have no one but the mainstream media to thank for that.
Right. I mean, it's almost, it gets into an era, a situation that is like a pre-Civil War situation. Right. And maybe they'll do like the Boston Globe in my own hometown traditionally does, which is wait until their person is securely launched onto the throne. And then they wait until a slow news day about a month later when they release all the bad news. You know?
That's the Boston Globe technique.
That's the Globe.
It reminds me of the New Haven Register when I grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah, the Globe tactic. And so maybe once they know they can relax and take a sigh of relief that they've got Biden on the throne, then they can start to retain or regain shreds of credibility by releasing the bad news in little bits of pieces. I mean, maybe that's the best we can hope for. I don't know. But meanwhile, there were a lot of things that were learned from this election that are very much in the bailiwick of populism and nationalism. And one of those things is that the real governing powers, the governing responsibilities, reside with state legislators and with the U.S. Congress, particularly the House. But in the case of legislators, they are the ones who have the legal and lawful responsibility of regulating elections. And the whole problem in 4 states, that being Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, was that they were bypassed. They did an end run around the legislators and started making laws by fiat. In the case of Pennsylvania, even after the election, they were making laws. And this is unconstitutional and wrong. It's undemocratic. And I think that we can urge state legislators to start to reassert their constitutional prerogative, not just in that area, but in all areas. And we can ask young people or retired people or people who are empty nesters, anyone who has some extra time, to consider running for local state rep and state senator, because it's an easy race to win. You may find that the person in there has been there for like decades and they've never done anything and never have been opposed. And I urge people to consider doing this. This is going to be a cause this year.
Yeah, it's so good. So for 4 years, we've been looking top down, strength and power in our politics. Now it's bottom up. That's what. And we need each other, and they need each other, and they imply one another. They're dialectic in that sense. You want both, ideally. And so, absolutely, I think this is galvanizing conservatives. Already, I think it was Jack Posobiec who tweeted out from One American News that every rhino up for re-election, he's got it the list. Every rhino up for re-election in 2022 looks like they're going to get primaried. And so this is exciting. We're starting to see exactly what you're saying. It's just citizen activists standing up and saying, you know what, what was it? Bill Buckley who said, I'd rather be governed by the first 100 names in the Boston phone book than the entire faculty of Harvard University. They're recognizing that the power belongs to them, and we only get what we tolerate. We only get the Mittens Romneys and the Mitch McConnells because we've tolerated them in the past. I think that toleration level is over. The talk of a Patriot Party is very interesting because I think it does have a lot of leverage in trying to force the establishment Republicans to begin to move more in our direction. That's how the Brexit Party pushed the Tories over to the right when it came to the Brexit issue. So these things are all good developments because what they're doing is at the grassroots level, they're forcing the establishment to begin to voice and take seriously the concerns of the people as over and against the concerns of the establishment. So right now, at best, what we have is not so much a Republican Party that was nationalist, populist, right. I think the mistake I made in my analysis over the last couple of months is I assumed that the civil war in the Republican Party ended in 2016, at least formally. I knew you still had plenty of establishment folk there, but I thought that Trump had so overwhelmingly transformed the party at the grassroots level, there was no way the establishment was going to go back to the permanent political class values and governing according to their own interests and their own concerns. Boy, was I wrong about that. Boy, did they switch fast. I mean, that was, that's faster than a green light and a New York, Manhattan taxi horn, beeping. I mean, that's, wow, did they switch. And that's what I mean. We're not so much nationalist populist right as we are nationalist populist light. And nationalist populist light means you've got your deplorables grassroots, but you have a thoroughly establishment leadership. And what we saw for 4 years is that establishment leadership more or less got tamed as soon as we got particularly Paul Ryan out of there. They got tamed. They were listening to the grassroots as we were led by the Godzilla politics in the White House. But the moment they smelled blood, they turned on him and they were like sharks and they took him out. And so now it's going to require us to take them out. And I think with this upcoming trial in February, with Mittens McConnell team kind of coming together there and saying this is a very important thing and we need to be doing, you're starting to see the Lindsey Grahams, the Rubios and so forth saying, no, we don't want to have anything to do with it. You can have your trial. We're going to sleep through it.
Right. Even John Roberts, Supreme Court Chief Justice, who is questionable, I would suggest, nevertheless has said that he doesn't want to have anything to do with this.
That's exactly right.
And you have strange comments from Schumer saying that just because Trump resigned, he didn't resign. That doesn't mean a trial goes forward. And then he quotes some nebulous group of constitutional scholars, both on the left and the right, who support this. I'd like to see him show a few names of people because I haven't seen anybody who is, I don't think that Dershowitz doesn't support it, and Jonathan Turley doesn't support it.
Jonathan Turley thinks it's absurd, and both
exactly.
Dershowitz and Turley are political liberals. It's not like they're right wingers who have any fish to fry in this thing. So no, absolutely, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is. Just think about it, Charles. It is the epitome of absurdity to have an impeachment trial for a private citizen.
And I think that, as usual, the left is overstepping itself. They've become drunk with their own absolutism and their own sense of total power, and they're going to basically step in it on this one because it's all going to come out, first of all, that when Trump marshals his defense, that the main ringleaders in that whole thing were Antifa, BLM anyway. In fact, even today already, we now have another one that's come out. I mean, I have this TikTok woman who follows me who says, oh, she was there as an anti-Trump person with a Trump hat on filming. And isn't it amazing? She got all this evidence. Well, if she was there, how does she know all these other people weren't? The whole thing is starting to come out. And the whole portrayal of this thing is, maybe, they've engaged in propaganda for 4 years and outright lies against Trump. maybe now it's like they're on steroids with that, and they're going to try to push this narrative, and I think it's going to really backfire. Most Americans don't buy it. I think it's going to galvanize support. Now, President Trump has now gone on the record, apparently, and I don't know if you know about this, but he said that he's not leaning toward creating a third party. They're not going to have the Patriot Party, and that he's establishing an office of the former president, which is going to be engaged in advocacy, and I probably in an unspoken way, primarying out these enemies, these people who tried to stab him. What do you know about that?
Yeah, and he's in addition to that, apparently he has $70 million in his war chest to back it up, which is only going to get bigger as it goes along.
Sure.
So that's what I got conflicting reports on that. So absolutely, one report said he's Newsmax, if I recall, said he's moved away from the idea of a Patriot Party. He thinks because we own the Republican Party, it's just these establishment overlords that need to be overthrown, but we own it. There's no reason for us to leave the Republican Party. That does make sense. It's our party now.
Right.
And I mean, no other Republican candidate ever got 74, 75 million votes. I mean, this is our party. And we brought in the white working class and Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that had voted for the Democrat candidate in every single election over the last 30 years. We did the impossible. We brought this mass defection over here, very similar to what's happening in Europe, mass defection of the working class voters over to, say, the Tories, which is nobody ever dreamed would have happened. So that's taken place because in the end they're all nationalist populists. They just love their country, their faith, their family, their freedom. Just they're just localists in the best sense of the term. They're not ideologues or anything like that. So I think so. I think that's just taking over the Republican Party fully now by getting rid of the feckless rhino leadership and making it a truly nationalist populist right party is the key. We'll see with the Patriot Party if the Republicans radically disappoint in February, which I don't think they will. I don't. They have to. They can't. Not everyone can Pence themselves or Epstein themselves or anything like that. I mean, they've got to have a political future. So the only way they're going to do that is if they keep the deplorables happy, and the only way they keep the deplorables happy is by quitting Trump and mocking and ridiculing this process, which is what Rubio and Lindsey Graham have been doing. But having said that, deplorables were so betrayed over the last 2 months.
Yes.
They were so betrayed at all levels, at the state level, at the congressional level, at the judicial level. They were just so betrayed. And so, yeah, we can expect to see some momentum going toward third party, but if President Trump's not for it, it'll fizzle out. It won't go anywhere. He is the de facto leader of the nationalist populist movement in the United States, like Salvini is in Italy, or Bolsonaro in Brazil, or Orban in Hungary. So he's a de facto leader, and if he doesn't think it's a good idea, it'll fizzle out. But it is a good time to think about it because we are going through a process called de-alignment. That scholars are talking about. So, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50% of people felt a very strong tie to one of the two main political parties. Today, it's barely 10%. So that's why in Europe, we've been seeing third parties emerge all over the place and actually replacing the mainstream parties, particularly in France with Macron's En Marche and Marine Le Pen's National Rally. En Marche is barely 5 years old, 10 years old.
Right.
And National Rally is only a few decades. So it was started by your dad. So, I mean, and the Republicans and the Socialists are gone. They're basically out of the picture in France.
Same thing in England with UKIP, right?
UKIP was a perfect example. And then when they had the European Parliament elections in May of 2019, and it looked like Theresa May and the Tories were going to totally sabotage Brexit. Nigel Farage started the Brexit Party, and in 6 weeks after it was conceived, 6 weeks after its inception, 1 in 3 Brits voted for it. In a multi-party, nation, keep in mind that there was about 5-6 parties on that ticket. 1 in 3 voted for Brexit when it was barely 6 years old. And so then the Tories said, no mas, no mas. They throw out Theresa May. They said, we're 100% Brexit. They put in Boris. And then 6 months later, they win one of the biggest landslide national elections in a century. So so politics is a real roller coaster.
Sure.
And that's the kind of forcing function that a third party can have. But I think you're key on this, Charles. If Trump isn't behind it, it's dead in the water. It's not going anywhere.
Okay. And I think that I was hoping that Biden, once installed, would want to be successful in the face of this, knowing that the election had been stolen, knowing he probably didn't even take the popular vote, and knowing that there was no movement behind him, that he would probably govern in a way that confirmed President Trump's policies because he wants to do well, and those policies are successful policies. Maybe he might throw a few cosmetic bones to the left, just for to keep the bubbas happy. But for the most part, he would govern from center right. Well, apparently, it's only been a week or so, but he is not doing that. He's moving to the left very rapidly. You have the cancellation of the XL pipeline, which means a giveaway to communist China, a giveaway to the oil companies because cost is going to go up. You've got, other similar policies, the rejoining of the Paris Peace Accords, which again is a giveaway to the communist Chinese and to other polluters. And it just puts a straitjacket on the United States. And we could go down the list. I mean, probably the most troubling one, which is the first initiative coming from the new Congress, is going to be this H.R. 1 bill, which has in it a codification of all the means by which elections are stolen. You can't have a national ID. You can't purge local voter rolls of people who had died or moved out of state. It's going to allow 16-year-olds to vote. I mean, it's complete shopping list of voter fraud agendas. So does he think that he has a mandate to do this? How is this going to affect the electorate? Is it going to galvanize the left to the degree that they have any political pull?
It's a good question. We actually the connection cut out a little bit, but I think I got the point to that. I don't think so. I really don't. I think what is happening here is Biden is basically reconstituting the very Obama-era conditions that gave rise to the massive nationalist populist uprising in the first place.
Right.
So he'll make the George Stephanopoulos and the CNNs and the editors of the New York Times and the Boston Globe very, very happy, and they'll give them glowing coverage, and then they'll bring in their Princeton economists, to come in and say, oh, everything is wonderful and hunky-dory and the like. And all the time they're doing it, the media's trust meter just keeps going down and down and down and down. And the frustration at the grassroots level, people who want their borders secured, they want their jobs kept back home, not being shipped off to third world nations, and they want their cultures, customs, and traditions celebrated and revered rather than despised and derogated. That's just going to continue to grow and grow. Again, exactly like what we're seeing happening in Europe. So I think it's kind of like it's sort of a reset. It's making the left happy. It's making the globalist ideologues happy. But in the end, all it's doing is reconstituting the very conditions that gave us Trump in the first place. That's all they're doing.
Plus, on the facts on the ground is that it's going to be disastrous policy. I mean, he's put a pause on the building of the wall and border. Meanwhile, you've got caravans forming again with thousands of people. I wonder how many of them are going to have masks on,
right,
as they cross in. I mean, the whole country is going to react to that. And other similar policies. You've got now troops going into Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, back to the policy of perpetual war for perpetual peace. This is Trump was against that. He was for de-escalating international wars and international tensions. We could have predicted that. And I don't think the American people are going to buy it.
I don't think so either. We won the day. I mean, there was a poll. I forget. I thought it was a Reuters poll. I'm not sure, but it was a pretty extensive study on Americans' attitudes towards borders and economy in particular. And as we're talking, 70% of the population of registered voters were basically America First proponents. Now, again, They don't necessarily translate that in their politics. So, for example, African Americans are the number one ethnic demographic that is most likely to want immigration stopped altogether. They want the border completely secured. They can't stand illegal immigration, largely because, again, it interrupts with entry-level job positions, particularly in urban areas where 16-year-old kids trying to get a dishwasher job, but somebody somebody from Guatemala is willing to get paid $1 an hour for it. So they end up getting economically disenfranchised disproportionately when it comes to entry-level positions. So they despise open borders. And yet, 95% of African Americans vote for the open border candidate. So it has yet to translate. But we're seeing that happen, particularly in the last election with Latinos. And we're seeing it with African Americans as well. Blacks, I think Trump got the highest percentage of the black vote since 1960 for any Republican.
Yeah, exactly.
We're starting to see it. And we're starting to see it. And you and I have talked about this in the Jewish community here, as the Haredi Jews end up, having, 10 kids per family and so forth. It's the same thing.
They're taking over.
In Israel.
Yeah.
They're starting to become the Jewish population, basically.
They are.
30%, the 45, the 55%. And they voted for Trump 70, 80%, particularly in Brooklyn and Manhattan and the like. So we are starting to see the paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
Make its way, but it's going to take some time. But we can definitely sit back and at least be heartened that the shift is moving in our direction because the sentiments are already there. Now it's just got to work out the logical political positions.
Exactly. And Steve, I'm glad that you're on the cutting edge and as a leader in this movement. And I'm looking forward to dialoguing with you in the coming months and years as you do this. I know you've been in the vineyards for a long time. I think, weren't you involved with helping in France and in England and Britain, the nationalist movement?
Yeah, well, we were reporting on that pretty early on. Yeah, starting around 2016. We were looking at the rise, particularly of Nigel Farage's UKIP and National. Well, it was National Front back then, Marine Le Pen, and so on, and just seeing that. I liked calling it back then. I was looking back at the old videos, and I was calling it the Brexit blowback. I haven't used that in a while but back then it was really fresh, and everybody was still shocked by it.
Yeah, sure.
But the Brexit blowback and how that blowback was creating aftershocks all over the world, and it's been really exciting to watch.
So, Steve, let my listeners and viewers know how they can reach you and your excellent show and some of your programs and any other information you want to impart.
Oh, thanks, Charles. Yeah, they can check me out on YouTube. Just put in Dr. Steve Turley. I've got a new Rumble channel that we're just starting up. It's getting close to 100,000 subs. We're really excited about that. So if you come over to Rumble, just put in Dr. Steve Turley. And you can check out my podcast as well. On all the different podcast platforms, and then you could go to my website at my last name, Turley, and Talks, Turley Talks.com.
All right, Steve Turley, always an honor, always a pleasure. I really appreciate you joining me as usual.
Right back at you, Charles. Thank you, man. God bless.
Thanks a lot. Same to you. Okay, and we're going to do some brief open lines here as we wind up the hour. You're welcome to join us, 617-396-4958. What is on your mind? 617-396-4958. Again, I want to thank Dr. Steve Turley for joining me earlier. I'll tell you, his website, his YouTube is gangbusters. I look at it every day, and he's very positive. Especially during these times when we're concerned about creeping Nazism which is what's happening, I would contend, in this country. And you feel kind of a little despondent, and you see how things are being stolen, and bad news comes in, like the Supreme Court's decided not to hear evidence. That was a pretty dark day for me. And the incursion in the Capitol, of course, which interrupted President Trump's the 7 states that were contesting the election. That was a pretty dark day. And other events. Steve Turley has a way of putting things in its proper overall context that, it's not that it makes you feel good. It's not happy talk, but it's, it gives it a perspective by which we can begin to understand what's happening and how we can, as people who are seeking to advance individual freedom, how we can marshal the forces that are with us, because those forces are the natural forces. So, again, Steve Turley, check out Turley Talks, check out Dr. Steve Turley on YouTube. You're welcome to join me, Charles Moscowitz, Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at YouTube and at Facebook and at all of the subscribing platforms, which are growing in number. I actually just compiled a list of the number of platforms that carry the show, and I think it's now up to almost 30. And I'm going to figure out how to publish that list so anyone can go to any one of these venues, and some of them are pretty big venues like iHeartRadio and Spotify and Alignable and Pandora, I think, is now carrying the show. So it's and I'm getting it live on many of these venues too, which of course is my goal here, to do a live program where we can interact, we can have phone calls, we can talk, we can get out news. And so in that vein, you're welcome to join the program. 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. I am working toward a degree in sociology. I never went to college formally, and now in my old age, I'm doing this, and I can tell you that I'm taking statistics, and I do it. I do the class every morning before this show. 4 days a week, doing it through Zoom, and from 10 to 11, and it's an interesting field. It's not math, which is good for me because I'm not good with math, but it deals with how to gather data, how to do polling in an accurate way, how to do samples, as they call it. And of course, this relates to the election. I wonder how many data statisticians are going to actually do a deep dive into the election. I would hope that should be a main theme for stats education today and going forward, because it's a significant development. And one of the things that I remember, actually, while we were doing the class today, I was thinking about this, is that in Arizona, about a month ago, before the inauguration, I think it was sometime in January, the state legislature there, which is a good, solid Republican legislature, they were able to get a sample study of the Dominion voting machine vote, like a forensic audit of, I think it was a very tiny sample. It was about 100 votes. And of that 100 votes, they discovered that 3 of them had been fraudulently turned from Trump to Biden, and that one of them was just outright fraud. It was thrown out because it was a mistake. And it's my understanding that based on statistical models, which is what I'm studying now, and again, I'm no expert, but I'm delving into it, that this means that 3% of that vote was fraudulent, and that 3% of that vote should have been for Trump. Now, if that same sample is applied to the entire population of Maricopa County, which is the main voting county in Arizona, it's about 65% of Arizona. This is, where Maricopa County goes, the state goes. It includes Phoenix, the biggest city in Arizona. I think it also includes Tucson. That would mean that 3% of the entire vote in that county fraudulently was switched from Trump to Biden. And in that case, we're talking about, I don't know how many million votes were cast in that county. Let's say 1 million, for the sake of argument. If it had been 1 million votes cast, then wouldn't that mean 300,000? Or would it be 30,000? Let me get it straight. I think it's 33% would be 30,000. Someone do the math. 30,000 votes were fraudulently switched from Trump to Biden using that model. Now, I'm not saying that that's how statistics should be done. Again, I'm only in the very early stages of studying this, but it's my understanding that that's generally how statistics are done. And if that were the case, and 30,000 votes were switched from Trump to Biden, then Trump would win Arizona because Biden only won that state by about 10,000 votes. So I think that if we have statisticians, and I intend to do this as a project for my accredited college class, look at the vote probably in all 50 states, but certainly in the contested states, and look at these sorts of irregularities, then they're going to be able to show evidence, not prove, but show evidence that the election had been stolen. There are statistics coming out of Georgia that show that there were 60,000 votes cast by people who were underage. They were not of legal voting age. Now, everyone is talking about how the two new senators in Georgia, John Ossoff and Emmanuel, what's his name? They both won the youth vote, right? They sure did win the youth vote in this case. In fact, it was so youthful that it wasn't even eligible to vote if 60,000 votes were cast by people under the age of 18. And of course, they didn't win those elections by, it was like Trump. I mean, they won their election by, very thin margins, maybe 10,000 votes at most. So that might have been enough to tip the election. I guess that the broad point here is that it ain't over in terms of trying to examine to the best of our ability. And of course, we're now operating in a position of weakness because the government has been seized. But we are operating nevertheless, and we are forging forward in terms of getting to the truth. I live in Arizona, and I'm sure there were more votes than that were switched. I'm pissed off. Yeah, I mean, I think there are people in Arizona, in their state legislators, that are really courageous and that are staying the course. Arizona could change the whole ballgame still, even after the fact. I mean, I've been talking about this certainly on TikTok every day. And, I still think that the eyes of the nation are on Arizona. And by the way, Arizona also, putting aside the Trump election, there's some major corruption in that state. Has been for decades. Same thing with California, I may add. I mean, my good friend Michael Shaw keeps saying, how is it that California, which had been a solidly Republican state, they elected Reagan, they elected Nixon, they had Republican governors, all of a sudden, like overnight, went completely liberal and left by millions of votes. How did that happen? Did that happen by accident? Did all of a sudden the people of California wake up one day and say, oh, we love socialism, right? We want to see higher taxes. We want to see businesses more regulated. We want to see judges making up laws from the bench. We want to see international wars. We hate American sovereignty. We want to swing open our border. Did that suddenly happen overnight in California? Very suspicious. Very suspicious. And I think it very well may have a lot to do with these electronic voting machines. So I would argue that going forward, we have to advocate that all of these electronic voting methodologies be scrapped. They be sent to the garbage dump. There should be no electronic voting, period. Most countries in the world have rejected it. Many states have rejected it, including Texas. There is no excuse for it. We can have the vote counted out in the open during business hours, or maybe not necessarily, I guess. I mean, if there's a big election, but out in the open with both Democrats and Republicans at the table, with the media there watching the count of every single vote. We certainly should have absentee ballots like they do in Massachusetts, which is that you check the signature and there's a person's registered, but there should be no mail-in ballots. I mean, none of this papering the house, which, by the way, they did do in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts also does have the Dominion voting. Somebody in the state should sue. I should sue to have that looked at. We should have voter ID. I've said this before. It's not brain surgery. It's very simple. Most nations have it. I mean, Mexico, you have to actually give a fingerprint when you show up to vote. I don't think we need to go that far, but we ought to have a simple means by which a person is identified at the polling booth. And it shouldn't cost anything. Does that mean like a photo ID? I don't see why not. I think it should be free. One of the lies put forth by the left, and by the way, liberals originally supported this, including Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm and other liberal leaders, until all of a sudden, like overnight, a switch went off and they took an about face and they decided to oppose it, a volta faccia. Wonder why? Maybe George Soros got involved? I don't know. But whatever happened, all of a sudden the left became against it. And then you had the creation of this phony turf group funded by George Soros called the Brennan Institute, which was created around that time and which came out with this phony report claiming that somehow voter ID was proof that you have something against black men and women, which is a complete lie. They're saying black person is not capable of getting the same ID as everyone else. I mean, that's in itself racist. I mean, that's like the Rudyard Kipling, white man's burden form of racism. And so they were able to stop voter ID. We have to make sure that our local voting counties and precincts are properly vetted for people who are on the rolls, who have either passed away or who have left the state or who are underage or who are convicted criminals or whatever. They're not eligible to vote. That's how we protect the system of one man, one vote. That's a civil rights issue. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement in the 1960s fought to ensure that African Americans had access to the ballot box. Do we want to have those votes now diluted by fraud? Do we want to have those votes now compromised by false votes? That's the civil rights question. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Tomorrow I've got Matthew Vadim joining me at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The program is Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do take calls. The program is live. The phone number is 617-396-4958. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And my books are available at Amazon Books, including my latest book, which is a quick read, a quick down and dirty understanding of the election fraud. It's called We're All Socialists Now, A Deplorable Looks at the 2020 Election. I'm writing this year. My goal, besides doing the show every day, is to publish these short books, almost these pamphlet-style books. My next one is going to deal with the 1776 Commission and how it was taken down on the first day of the Biden administration and replaced by critical race theory. What that means to our culture, what that means to our educational system. I'm going to document the report itself with commentary and also the critical race theory with commentary. So that's what's going on with me this week. Charles Moscowitz, I want to thank you for joining me, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Thank you very much, and God bless this country.